Hello and welcome to Dartmouth-Hitchcock's Heads Up Coping Through COVID-19 Virtual Roundtable series. I'm Audra Burns, Media Relations Manager at Dartmouth-Hitchcock and the moderator of the series. Today we are going to be discussing how employers are dealing with the return to the workplace after being fully remote or hybrid since the start of COVID-19 in March of 2020. Joining me today, I have three incredible guests, which includes Heather McGrail. She is the Director of Membership and Community Partnerships at the Greater Manchester Chamber. Hi, Heather.
Hi, Audra. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. You're going to offer a unique perspective from the business community. Next, we have Brenda Blair. She is our Vice President of Total Rewards at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. Hi, Brenda.
Hi, Audra. Thanks for having me today.
Great to have you. And rounding out our panel is Dr. Steve Cole. He is a licensed psychologist and manager of the Dartmouth-Hitchcock Employee Assistance Program. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Audra. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get this kicked right off, and we'll start with you, Heather. You know, many employers are faced with the choice of requiring their employees to receive the COVID-19 vaccine. So how can employers navigate that decision?
Yes, it's very trepidatiously, I would say. A lot of the conversations we've had with employers have, of course, started with risk assessment. You know, how many employees are currently vaccinated is the first question, but also what business units are really public facing and meeting with customers and clients or even vendors that may require vaccines. So looking at those risks of the different business units is, I think, first and foremost, the steps that employers are taking. But I will say, given the climate of staff shortages that everyone is dealing with across the spectrum of all segments of business, the other factor is that you can't really look at it just through health safety. They're also really looking at it through a lens of talent safety, so to speak. So retention, you know, how many employees are really going to be impacted and be a flight risk if vaccine mandates are enforced. And so that's a substantial consideration on many employers' minds as well, given the high quit rate we are already dealing with on a regular basis. So we see that a lot of employers looking at that. And of course, the policies and procedures that would follow, a lot of layers involved in vaccination mandates, such as, do you then mandate the booster long term? Do you mandate it across all business units or only pick and choose? There's definitely not a one size fits all on this one.
Yep, that's for sure. And that kind of leads us, you know, something I want to ask Brenda. You know, employers, they're going to have to navigate how employees, they might be refusing to get the vaccine. So whether it's mandatory at one company or not, you know, what tips do you have for employers in this situation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question and does align with Heather's comments, because I think the first thing that, before you talk about employees and their reaction to it, it's making sure you're making the right decision for your, as the employer, right? For your organization, for your business, et cetera. And I think what's really, really important is understanding the pros and the cons of mandating vaccine and what the fallout potentially could be. When we think about in the healthcare setting, why would we potentially mandate a vaccine? We have a responsibility to our patients, our community, and to our coworkers. And so ensuring the safety of everyone around us is part of what we do, whether there's a pandemic or not. And there definitely are, I'm sure, other businesses that have less reasons to mandate that vaccine. And they should consider the impact on their staff, their customers, their community, and how that affects their business. But when we think about employees and their considerations for not wanting to get a vaccine, what's really, I think, critical is providing options for people. There are definitely employees who don't want or cannot receive the vaccine. It could be an issue related to a religious perspective or a medical necessity. And asking employees to seek out for exemptions to the vaccine is a process that we have gone through at Dartmouth-Hitchcock, and allowing employees to share their concerns. And we have researched those and understood which ones we're able to allow and which ones we are not able to allow. So giving people that option. But the other side of it is understanding the implications to those unvaccinated employees if they are able to receive an exemption, and how they will affect your business or your organization if they're an unvaccinated employee working within your organization. And in some cases, depending on risk factors, they may need additional personal protective equipment, as an example.
Mhm.
And the other group of people to be thinking about is not just your employees who are currently there, but your new employees that will be joining you, as well as those who are on a leave of absence, and making sure that all of those employees are considered in all of the work that you're doing to understand this.
That's really great perspective. And, Steve, in our last episode, which our viewers, you can check that out at the link on your screen, we talked about the mental health of employees. So now that we're talking about employers, this certainly has taken a toll on them. And just like Brenda had mentioned, they have so many decisions and options that they need to be weighing out. So what advice can you give them if employees are struggling with their own mental health?
Right. Well, I think just picking up on something that both Heather and Brenda referred to, I mean, I think that employers are under tremendous strains figuring out how to retain employees while keeping everybody safe, and so it's safety first, but then they do have to think about the business. The American Psychological Association released an update of their survey on workplace well-being recently. And so it looked at changes during COVID-19. And in 2019, a third of all employees said they intended to find another job. And now that number in 2021 is up to 40%. So it's not, it's not huge, but it's alarming. That's a lot of people, those percentages. And employees that reported that they were feeling stressed every day at work, they were 3 times more likely to be looking for other jobs. So some factors to think about in terms of retention and the mental health of the business, if you will, are salaries. Are you paying enough? Because that's number one on employees' mind in surveys. The hours, are they reasonable? Because we've all been working more, or most of us have been working more. Are there opportunities for growth and advancement? And do employees feel like they're included in decisions? And I think what employers can do is focus on helping employees prioritize all the different things they have to do. So not everything is urgent all the time, which is impossible. And being transparent about their goals and purposes for the business, making employees feel part of rather than less than. And for example, when it comes to the question of mask mandate or vaccine, as Brenda was just discussing, really focusing on why you might be considering a mandate. That, in other words, that you care about the employee's health and you care about keeping the customers or the patients safe as well. I think also asking for input from employees is very important. And finally, providing, just to think about providing spaces for and time for employees to socialize, because that turns out to be just one of the most important protective factors.
I think you raise a really good point, well, several good points, but one of those about, making sure the employees feel like they're participating in decisions or have input. And that leads me to my next question for you, Heather, because let's talk about, the experience of employers or who are going to implement new types of schedules, whether it's a hybrid schedule, whether they have to, employees have to come back to their offices or their locations, or whether they're fully remote. The example here with Dartmouth-Hitchcock Health, when we went fully remote in my department, we had, they sent out an email, they wanted our input, whether it could work or not work, our feelings on it. So we felt like we could help make that decision on what would work best in our work working situation. So what would you say to employers who are struggling with the decision of what their workforce is going to look like, where they're going to work from?
Yeah, I would definitely second what you just said, Audra, and also you, Steve, with being very cognizant of involving the employees in the process. I think it's very easy to do because we're all on this ride together with all these life changes that have been brought on by COVID. And from what we've seen in successes with the businesses that we've worked with, when there's less of a division between leadership and employees, and where it's really more of a organic full team approach, it has been more successful. That's not to say that the employer sticks with the first strategy they choose. We've seen a lot of businesses thinking they're going to stay all remote and kind of preparing for that full throttle. And then you find that, oh, no, that's not working. Our team doesn't have enough time together. The camaraderie is slipping. We really need that, time as a team. And so then they adapt to a hybrid schedule. So I think it's keeping an open mind seems to be what really helps, and being nimble and able to really communicate clearly with your employees, like, here's what we're trying now, but it doesn't mean that that's what's going to exist next year. So I think that's really important. Also, we've seen in the chamber over the past couple of years, a lot more focus on mental health in the workplace, non-COVID related, but just really focusing on that holistic employee. And I think that this plays perfectly into that, where, we're all trying to struggle with a quality of life balance, and, sending out even if it's confidential, a survey of your employees and asking them the questions can't hurt. I know that a lot of the advice says don't necessarily follow that like it's the Bible, because you have to look at your productivity rates, you have to look at the economics of the situation. But I think at the very least, it makes employees feel heard about what is in their future, and kind of lessens the desire to flex.
And that also kind of reiterates the point that Steve made about the transparency and how important that is for employers and employees to have that. So, Brenda, one thing that employers, and specifically in the service and retail industries, have to think about when they have customers coming in and out is, what does their masking policy look like for both employees and customers? So we know mask guidance has eased up a bit, and we don't know who's vaccinated or not vaccinated. We don't know the status. So what tips do you have for employers when they need to enforce a mask wearing policy for employees and customers, but they might be met with criticism?
Yeah, I think, there's some themes in a lot of our answers to these questions. And one that I think is something to continue into this one is to talk about the why, and to keep the why in front of people. What is the purpose of the mask, and why are we, asking our employees to do this and to mandate the use is so incredibly important. So many people today, especially after the last year and a half of, having clear rules, regulations, where you go, where you can't go, whether you wear a mask, whether you don't wear a mask. When it started to loosen up, I think people had a sense of freedom, a little bit of, yay, I can, go back to my normal life. And that has really given a little bit of, I think, levity in some of the situations that we have with going into different organizations where we have a mask, we don't have a mask. And I think now, because of that lull that we had, it's getting a little bit harder to reinforce the masks again. And so it is challenging to bring that back and say, we require every single employee to wear a mask. But bringing it back to the why is really, really important. I think the other thing is to tie it. One thing that I've really experienced a lot of our conversations around, what's the risk and what's the benefit? And people really want to understand, well, why am I wearing this mask? When you think about risk, right, especially in the healthcare industry, we're thinking about risk that we have as we potentially could be exposed to patients with COVID. And so that risk to ourselves and our well-being is really, really critical. And then the benefit of being protected, to be able to feel comfortable to leave our work environment and go be with our family and our friends, and know that we're not, hopefully bringing that virus to them. So really helping people to understand that risk and the benefit that they get as a result of wearing a mask. I think one other thing that's really important that's been really interesting is the changes in regulations, and especially with something like OSHA. So OSHA has come out recently with very clear guidelines on employee safety and what they need to be wearing and having for personal protective equipment in the workforce. In some cases, it's not an employer choice. It is following the regulations that come from OSHA and making sure that we're following things like that. So be a little flexible when you can, follow the regulations when you have to, and make sure that employees understand the why behind why we're doing this.
Yeah, that's a really great grounding point of just bringing it back to the why of it. And because clearly employers have a lot of decisions to make, and those decisions are probably going to change in the next few months, and they're going to consistently change until, we get through this pandemic. So Steve, I think support and resources are important. So where can employers and business owners find the support amid making all of these difficult decisions?
Well, I put together some resources which I think are going to be in the chat, and then they'll be posted later. So I just wanted to mention those. And then I wanted to mention, I think, a model that I've found very helpful during COVID and trying to figure out how to help people with all this stress is called Stress First Aid. It comes out of the National Center on PTSD. And it's really a common sense model for thinking about self-care. How do I care for myself, and how do I care for my colleagues, peer support? And it's based on the literature, which says that people tend to do better in ongoing stressful circumstances when they have one of 5 essential elements to counteract the adversity. So the first is one that Brenda just mentioned with the example of mask, which is being able to move towards a feeling of greater safety, and the mask can do that. Being able to calm oneself, when we get so stressed, being able to feel connected to others, having go-to people we trust at work and can be ourselves with, feeling competent, feeling like we're going to be able to get through this, and having a sense of optimism or hope. And so the goal of this program is really to move people towards wellness, and it normalizes the stress that we're all feeling, and it destigmatizes reaching out for support.
I think that's a critical point that you just made about destigmatizing. That's kind of the overarching theme that we've been trying to do with these Heads Up series, is that we want to destigmatize people to know that they can reach out, and they should reach out, and there are resources available. And so those resources that you mentioned, we will have them linked to the video as well. And then for our viewers, if you go to that website that's on your screen, all of the resources will be linked to that page. So I encourage you to go check out those, because Steve has compiled some really great resources for you to check out. So before we wrap up, I'd love to have all of you touch base on one key thing that you want to have our viewers take away from this conversation. So Heather, let's start with you.
Sure. I would say really it's the only thing constant is change. I don't know who to attribute that quote to, but it's one of my favorites for these times. And I think every analysis needs to really blend the objective with the subjective, because these decisions are affecting people's lives so much that it's just a different business world than it used to be. So you really can't kind of go with the economics and ignore that other side of the talent that you have and that you want to retain. So I think really making sure that you're approaching all decisions nimbly and often, and blending the objective with the subjective with every turn.
Gosh, nimbly is a great word that we've probably used more often this year than we've ever used before. So that's so great. And I think one thing that I heard you say earlier, which was important too, is that you mentioned that we're all in this together. And that seems to be a theme that has come up in several of these conversations that we've had through Heads Up. And so that's a really important thing to remember, that we are all going through this together. So thank you for your expertise on that. So Brenda, what about you? What's a key takeaway?
Well, I think it's think outside the box. Like, our world is so different today than it was a year and a half ago. And who could have imagined that we would be where we are today with the number of remote workers, with the processes and safety measures that we have in place. It's just amazing to think about all the change that we have come through. And I think as we're thinking outside the box, we should continue to be creative and to be flexible and you all talked about this, include our employees in the process all the way through. We're all, and again, we're all going through this together, the employers and the employees. So let's figure it out together and be flexible, creative, and change the world.
Excellent. We can do it. We can survive this. Steve, what about you? What's some final wrap-up ideas?
Well, I guess I would just offer that in general, people are pretty damn resilient. And but that doesn't mean that it's easy. And it doesn't mean that we have to make it look easy. You know, I think sometimes leaders feel this pressure, like, you know, they're trying to juggle all these balls and take care of so many people and all the while look cool, calm, and collected. I think it's really important for employers to allow themselves to be real and to share how they've struggled and, you know, what's helped them. Because I think employees can really connect to that. And, you know, one of my old professors called resilience ordinary magic. And I think that really captures it. You know, it's, you want to be willing to give support, but you also want to be willing to accept it.
That's really great advice. And I think it makes me remember, you know, when you're doing resumes and you have to put words that describe you, I feel like the majority of everyone is now going to put resilient as one of their key words that describe them, because we're all certainly trying to handle this. Thank you to the three of you, Heather, Steve, and Brenda, for joining me. You all have offered some really great insights. For our viewers, we'll be sure to link the resources to this video and on our website, so please check those out. So thank you to the three of you for joining me.
Thank you.
You can view past Heads Up segments on our website, so please check those out. We are going to announce the fourth and final segment in the near future. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and stay safe. Take care.